Hey guys, tonight we're exploring a story that everyone in history should know. The story is Why Medieval Peasants Were Happier Than You. You get comfortable. Take a moment, like the video, and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Why medieval peasants were happier than you imagine that the world around you has become wonderfully quiet. The day has slipped gently into evening, and somewhere beyond your window, the sounds of modern life begin to fade. There are no buzzing phones, no glowing screens asking for your attention, and no endless stream of messages waiting to be answered. Instead, you find yourself standing at the edge of a small medieval village sometime during the 13th century. The air is cool and fresh. A soft breeze moves through the tall grasses, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and nearby forests. The only sounds are birds settling into the trees, the distant lowing of cattle, and the gentle creaking of wooden cartwheels returning home before sunset. Tonight, we are exploring a question that may sound surprising at first. Why were medieval peasants happier than many people today? The answer is not as simple as saying that life was better long ago. Medieval life was filled with hardships that few of us would willingly accept. Disease, poor harvests, and difficult winters could change a family's future overnight. Yet happiness does not always depend on comfort alone. Sometimes it grows quietly from belonging, purpose, routine, and close connections with the people around us. As we slowly travel through this forgotten world, we will leave behind many modern assumptions. We are not here to judge the past or to imagine it as a perfect place. Instead, we are simply visitors, walking gently through villages, fields, workshops, and quiet homes, observing the rhythms that shaped ordinary lives many centuries ago. Picture yourself following a narrow dirt path leading toward a cluster of small cottages. Each home is built from timber frames packed with woven branches and clay. Their roofs are covered with thick straw that has been carefully replaced over the years. Smoke rises lazily from simple chimneys, drifting into the cool evening sky. Children laugh somewhere beyond a wooden fence. Chickens scratch the ground, searching patiently for insects. A dog stretches beside a doorway before curling back into a comfortable sleep. Nothing here moves very quickly. There is no rush, because tomorrow will arrive with sunrise, just as it always has. The people who lived here rarely traveled far from home. Many would spend nearly their entire lives within a few miles of the village where they were born. To us, that may sound limiting. Yet to them, the village contained almost everything they needed. Their families, neighbors, church, fields, forests, and familiar landmarks created a world that felt complete. Modern people often dream about seeing the entire world. Medieval peasants usually dreamed of healthy children, enough grain for winter, and peaceful seasons. Their hopes were smaller, but perhaps that also made them easier to appreciate. As the evening deepens, imagine walking beside one of the villagers returning from the fields. His clothing is simple. A loose linen tunic hangs comfortably over woolen trousers. His shoes are sturdy, but worn from many years of walking the same familiar paths. His hands show the marks of honest work, rough from handling tools and tending crops. He's tired, but his tiredness is different from the exhaustion many people know today. His body has worked throughout the day, yet his mind is not crowded with endless decisions, advertisements, or constant interruptions. Once the work is finished, the evening truly belongs to him and his family. His wife has spent much of the day caring for children, preparing meals, tending the small garden, spinning wool, feeding animals, and helping whenever extra hands were needed. Medieval households rarely separated work from family life. Children learned simply by watching their parents. Grandparents often lived nearby, sharing stories, advice, and practical knowledge that had been passed down through generations. Today, many families live hundreds or even thousands of miles apart. Medieval families usually remained close together. Several generations often knew each other deeply, sharing daily routines instead of occasional visits. Imagine entering one of the cottages as darkness slowly settles outside. The room is warm from a small fire burning in the center or within a simple hearth. The smell of wood smoke mixes with fresh bread, onions, herbs, and a thick vegetable stew that has simmered patiently throughout the afternoon. Light flickers softly across wooden beams blackened by years of smoke. The furniture is modest. A sturdy table stands near several rough benches. Wooden bowls rest neatly beside clay cups. There is little decoration because every object has a purpose. Nothing is bought simply because it is fashionable. Nearly everything inside this home has been made, repaired, or carefully preserved for many years. Modern homes often contain hundreds or even thousands of possessions. Medieval cottages contained very few. Surprisingly, this simplicity sometimes reduced worries rather than creating them. There were no endless choices between different brands, styles, or trends. Clothing was worn until it could no longer be repaired. Tools were maintained with great care. Broken items were fixed instead of replaced whenever possible, so life moved according to nature rather than schedules printed on calendars. As the morning slowly arrives each day, sunlight quietly enters through small openings in the walls. Roosters announce the beginning of another day. Cows wait patiently to be milked. Horses stamp gently inside their shelters. The changing seasons governed nearly every activity. Spring meant planting. Summer meant long days of growing crops. Autumn brought harvest. Winter invited quieter work indoors while families repaired tools, spun thread, carved wood, and shared long evenings around the fire. These repeating cycles created a deep sense of rhythm. People understood where they belonged within the turning year because they participated directly in it. Modern life often feels disconnected from the changing seasons. Supermarkets offer strawberries during winter and pumpkins during spring. Electric lights make midnight look almost like noon. Offices remain nearly the same, regardless of weather outside. Medieval villagers noticed every small change. The first blossom carried hope. The arrival of swallows signaled warmer days ahead. The smell of freshly cut hay reminded everyone that summer was reaching its height. The golden colors of ripening grain announced that harvest was approaching. Even the quiet arrival of frost became an important event. Nature was not simply scenery. It was their calendar. Imagine standing beside the village fields as dawn slowly spreads across the landscape. Thin mist rises from the grass, while dew sparkles softly in the early sunlight. Somewhere nearby, an ox patiently pulls a wooden plow through dark earth. Birds follow behind, searching for worms brought to the surface. The work is demanding, yet it unfolds at a pace determined by animals, weather, and daylight, rather than by constant deadlines. Many modern jobs continue long after sunset through emails, phone calls, and late-night notifications. Medieval fieldwork usually ended when darkness made further work impossible. Night encouraged genuine rest. Without bright artificial lighting, people naturally followed longer periods of sleep during winter and shorter nights during summer. Their bodies often aligned closely with daylight. Researchers studying traditional societies have found that natural light strongly influences healthy sleep patterns. Although medieval people certainly experienced interrupted sleep for many reasons, their relationship with daylight remained much closer than ours. Now imagine listening to conversations around the evening fire. No one checks a screen. No television speaks over family members. Stories become entertainment. Older villagers remember unusual winters from decades earlier. Someone tells the familiar tale of a clever fox escaping hunters. Another recalls the excitement of the annual fair held several villages away. Children listen carefully, hearing stories that have traveled through generations long before they were ever written down. Oral storytelling served many purposes. It preserved history. It taught lessons. It strengthened family identity. Most importantly, it brought people together. Modern entertainment is often consumed alone. Medieval entertainment usually happened together. The village itself functioned almost like one extended family. Neighbors depended upon one another during harvests, house building, illnesses, and celebrations. If someone's roof needed repair, others frequently helped. If livestock wandered away, nearby families joined the search. This close cooperation was not always perfect. Disagreements certainly happened. Arguments over land, animals, or boundaries appear in surviving medieval records. Yet despite occasional conflicts, survival encouraged cooperation, more often than isolation. You find yourself walking through the village on a Sunday morning. Church bells echo gently across the fields. Families emerge wearing their cleanest clothing. Friends greet one another warmly before entering the stone church together. Beyond religious worship, church served as the center of community life. Important announcements were shared there. Festivals began there. Marriages united families there. Children were baptized there. Entire villages gathered regularly in one place. Whether deeply religious or simply following tradition, these shared experiences strengthened social bonds. Today, many people experience loneliness despite living among millions of others. Medieval villagers rarely enjoyed privacy, but they also rarely experienced complete social isolation. There was nearly always someone nearby, someone to borrow a tool from, someone to share difficult news, someone to celebrate with after a successful harvest, someone to mourn beside when loss inevitably came. As gentle evening settles once again over the village, the stars begin appearing one by one across an unusually dark sky. Without electric lights, the heavens reveal extraordinary beauty. The Milky Way stretches overhead, like a pale river, flowing across endless darkness. Children lie quietly outside, listening as grandparents point toward familiar constellations whose stories have been shared for countless generations. Perhaps happiness sometimes grows in places where life feels deeply connected, to family, to neighbors, to seasons, to meaningful work, and to the natural world. Medieval peasants certainly faced hardships that we should never overlook. Yet amid those hardships, they also possessed forms of wealth that cannot be measured by coins alone. As the fire slowly burns lower and quiet conversation fades into comfortable silence, our gentle journey through medieval village life is only beginning. Beyond these cottages lie forests filled with hidden paths, bustling market towns, peaceful monasteries, colorful seasonal festivals, and countless ordinary moments that reveal why so many historians believe medieval happiness was far more complex than old stereotypes suggest. The first light of dawn arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, as a pale silver glow begins to spread across the eastern sky. The stars slowly fade, one after another, until only the brightest remain. A cool mist hangs low over the fields, softening the outlines of trees and cottages. Somewhere nearby, a rooster calls into the still morning, answered by another from across the village. Soon, the peaceful silence is gently replaced by the familiar sounds of another ordinary day. Imagine opening the small wooden door of a humble cottage. The cool morning air carries the fresh scent of damp grass mixed with smoke from fires that are just beginning to burn. Tiny drops of dew cling to every blade of grass, sparkling as the sun gradually rises above the distant hills. Inside the cottage, the family is already awake. There is little need for an alarm when daylight itself serves as the clock. A small pot hangs over the fire, warming yesterday's oat porridge. Fresh bread, baked only a day or two earlier, is sliced carefully. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest crust has value. For many medieval peasants, breakfast is simple, but it provides enough energy for the hours ahead. They eat slowly, speaking only a few quiet words. The youngest children rub sleep from their eyes, while older brothers and sisters prepare for the day's tasks. You may notice something surprising. No one seems to complain about being busy. Their work is expected, just as sunrise is expected. It is not viewed as an interruption to life. It is life itself. In the modern world, many people divide their existence into separate categories. There is work, home, exercise, hobbies, vacations, and retirement. Medieval villagers experienced far fewer divisions. Work, family, learning, and community blended together naturally throughout the day. As you step outside, the village slowly comes alive. Women draw water from the shared well while exchanging friendly conversation. A blacksmith opens the heavy wooden doors of his workshop. The smell of warm charcoal soon drifts through the cool air. A shepherd guides sheep toward nearby pasture, their bells producing soft, gentle rhythms that echo across the landscape. Children are already helping. A young boy carries kindling toward the fire. His sister gathers fresh eggs from beneath several hens. Neither task feels unusual. From an early age, children learn that every small contribution matters. Their work is not measured by wages, but by usefulness. They grow up seeing themselves as important members of the household. Modern childhood often includes many toys and organized activities. Medieval childhood offered far fewer possessions, but children usually enjoyed remarkable freedom outdoors. They climbed trees, explored streams, chased geese across fields, invented games using sticks and stones, and learned practical skills simply by observing adults. Picture yourself walking beside several children as they wander along the edge of the forest. Sunlight filters gently through the leaves overhead. Small birds dart from branch to branch, while squirrels disappear into the canopy above. The children know which berries are safe to eat and which plants should never be touched. They recognize bird songs, animal tracks, and the changing colors of the seasons. This knowledge does not come from books. It comes from daily experience. Every walk becomes a quiet lesson. Every season teaches something new. In many ways, medieval peasants were deeply educated about the world immediately around them. They might never learn geography beyond neighboring kingdoms, yet they understood their local landscape with astonishing detail. They knew where mushrooms appeared after autumn rains. They remembered which stream remained unfrozen longest during winter. They recognized the signs of approaching storms by watching birds, clouds, and the changing direction of the wind. Their classroom was the countryside itself. As the morning slowly continues, you find yourself following a farmer toward his fields. The land before you has been worked by the same family for generations. Every boundary is familiar. Every tree carries memories. Here stands the oak where children once played. There grows the hedge planted by a grandfather many years ago. Beyond lies the meadow where livestock graze peacefully each summer. This sense of place shaped medieval happiness more deeply than we often realize. Today, many people move frequently for education, careers, or new opportunities. While such mobility offers many advantages, it can also create feelings of rootlessness. For medieval villagers, home was not simply a house. It was an entire landscape. Every path carried stories. Every field held memories. Every hill reminded someone of an ancestor. This deep attachment to place created emotional security that lasted across generations. Of course, not every peasant owned the land they worked. Many farmed land belonging to local lords, monasteries, or noble families. They owed labor, rent, or a share of their harvest in return for protection and access to farmland. Modern readers sometimes imagine every medieval peasant as a helpless servant, without freedom. The reality was far more varied. Across medieval Europe, different regions followed different customs. Some peasants enjoyed considerable independence. Others faced heavier obligations. Over the centuries, these arrangements changed as populations grew. Kingdoms expanded. Wars reshaped society, and economies slowly evolved. History is rarely as simple as a single story. As the sun climbs higher into the sky, work begins in earnest. Several villagers harvest vegetables from carefully tended gardens. Others repair fences damaged during winter storms. Nearby, two men patiently sharpen wooden tools with smooth, practiced movements. There is conversation, but no rush. People speak while working. They sing familiar songs. Sometimes they work in comfortable silence. Modern productivity often encourages constant speed. Medieval work rewarded patience. A hurried harvest could damage valuable crops. A poorly built fence would soon collapse. Careful craftsmanship mattered because replacing tools required time and precious resources. Imagine watching a carpenter shape a wooden beam. Each stroke of his axe is deliberate. He pauses often to examine the grain. He adjusts his work according to the wood itself, rather than forcing it into an unnatural shape. There is a quiet satisfaction in creating something built to last. Many objects in medieval villages remained useful for decades. A table might serve several generations. A well-made chest could outlive its original owner. Clothing was patched repeatedly, growing softer with each repair. Today, many products are designed to be replaced. In medieval life, durability was a necessity. This encouraged people to value skill over speed. As noon approaches, the warmth of the sun settles comfortably across the countryside. Workers gather beneath the shade of large trees to eat their midday meal. Bread remains the foundation of nearly every meal, accompanied by cheese, onions, beans, herbs, or perhaps smoked fish depending on the region and season. Water is available, while ale is also commonly consumed in many places. Medieval ale was often weaker than many modern beers, and could be safer than untreated water in some communities, depending on local conditions. Meals are rarely hurried. There are no business meetings. No one scrolls through endless news. People simply eat. They notice the breeze. They notice the clouds. They notice one another. Conversation moves easily from weather to harvests, from children to village news. These ordinary moments quietly strengthen friendships. Modern psychology often reminds us that strong relationships are among the greatest predictors of happiness. Medieval villagers did not know the language of scientific studies. Yet their daily lives naturally created opportunities for regular face-to-face connection. Loneliness certainly existed. Grief certainly existed. Conflict certainly existed. But isolation was less common. You find yourself resting beneath the same tree, listening as an elderly farmer begins telling a story from his youth. He remembers a particularly harsh winter, many decades earlier. Snow covered the roads for weeks. Neighbors shared food whenever possible. Entire families worked together to protect livestock from freezing winds. As he speaks, younger listeners pay close attention, not because they are required to, but because memory itself is valuable. Before widespread literacy, older generations served as living libraries. They remembered weather patterns. They remembered local customs. They remembered family histories. Every conversation quietly preserved knowledge that might otherwise disappear forever. As afternoon stretches gently onward, soft clouds drift lazily across the sky. The fields shimmer with golden grain, moving like waves upon the wind. Bees hum among wildflowers. Butterflies drift between patches of clover. Somewhere in the distance, church bells quietly mark the passing hours. There is no pressure to check the exact time. Most people simply understand that the day is moving forward. Perhaps this slower awareness of time brought a certain peace. Modern clocks divide every hour into precise minutes. Digital calendars schedule months in advance. Medieval villagers lived more closely with natural rhythms. They watched shadows grow longer. They noticed birds returning to their nests. They observed the changing color of sunlight as evening approached. Time felt less like an enemy and more like a gentle companion, guiding each season toward the next. As the afternoon slowly begins to fade, the village prepares for another peaceful evening. Smoke once again rises from cottage chimneys. children return from fields and forests. Animals are safely brought home. The familiar rhythm repeats itself, not because life is dull, but because familiar routines often create quiet comfort. Tomorrow will bring another sunrise, another shared meal, another day of honest work, another evening gathered beside the fire. And as we continue our gentle journey, we will soon discover that one of the greatest sources of medieval happiness was not wealth, comfort, or status, but something far simpler: a remarkable number of holidays, festivals, and celebrations that filled the calendar with moments of rest, music, laughter, and community. Imagine that another peaceful morning has arrived. A gentle layer of mist still rests across the fields, softening the distant hills until they seem almost like a painting. The air is cool enough to make every breath feel fresh, carrying the faint scent of damp earth, wild herbs, and wood smoke drifting from the first fires of the day. You find yourself walking once again along the familiar village path. The ground beneath your feet is firm but uneven, worn smooth by generations of travelers who have followed this same route. Tiny birds flutter between hedgerows, searching for seeds among the grasses. Somewhere nearby, a cowbell rings softly as a herd is slowly guided toward open pasture. The village is waking, but today feels slightly different. There is an unusual sense of anticipation in the air. Faces seem a little brighter. Children whisper excitedly to one another. Even those preparing for the day's work smile more often than usual. The reason is simple: a feast day is approaching. When many people imagine medieval life, they picture endless labor without rest. It is an understandable image, but it is only part of the story. Across much of medieval Europe, the calendar was filled with religious feast days, local celebrations, seasonal festivals, and community gatherings. Depending on the place and the period, people could enjoy many dozens of days each year when ordinary work slowed or stopped altogether. These were not vacations in the modern sense. People did not board ships or trains to distant places. Instead, celebration came to them. The entire village became the destination. Imagine the church bell sounding across the countryside. Its deep voice rolls gently over fields of wheat and barley, through forests of oak and beech, across quiet streams and grazing meadows. Families leave their cottages dressed in their cleanest clothes. Children try their best to remain patient, though excitement shines clearly on their faces. For many villagers, these gatherings were among the happiest moments of the year. Life was usually built around routine. Festivals offered joyful change. As you follow the crowd toward the village green, you begin to notice small details. Someone has decorated a doorway with fresh flowers gathered that morning. Bundles of herbs hang from wooden posts, filling the air with pleasant aromas. Long tables are carried into the open, where neighbors work together to prepare food for everyone. No one seems concerned about impressing strangers. The celebration belongs to people who already know one another. This feeling of belonging is difficult to measure, yet it may have been one of the greatest treasures medieval villagers possessed. Today, many celebrations involve hundreds or thousands of unfamiliar faces. In the medieval village, almost every person had a shared history. They remembered each other's childhoods. They had worked beside one another during harvest. They had celebrated births together, They had mourned losses together. Their lives were woven together like threads in the same piece of cloth. As the mourning slowly continues, music begins to fill the air. Simple instruments appear one by one. A small drum keeps a steady rhythm. A shepherd plays a wooden pipe. Someone lifts a fiddle beneath their chin. The melodies are familiar. No printed sheet music is needed. Many songs have been passed from one generation to the next, simply through listening. Soon, people begin to dance. Not because they are skilled performers, not because anyone is judging them. They dance because dancing is part of being together. Children laugh as they imitate adults. Older couples move more slowly, smiling as familiar tunes awaken memories from years gone by. For a little while, worries about weather, harvests, and daily responsibilities become lighter. The celebration creates space for joy. Modern research often reminds us that shared experiences strengthen happiness more deeply than material possessions. Although medieval villagers never heard such studies, their lives naturally encourage these shared moments again and again. Picture yourself sitting beneath a broad oak tree while families enjoy their midday meal together. Fresh bread is placed upon the table. Bowls of thick vegetable stew pass from hand to hand. There is cheese made from the milk of local cows or sheep. Perhaps smoked fish if the village lies near a river. Perhaps roasted meat on especially important feast days. Apples, nuts, and berries appear when the season allows. No one worries whether the meal looks perfect. Its value lies in sharing. Conversation drifts gently between tables. Someone tells a humorous story that causes children to burst into laughter. Nearby, an elderly woman quietly teaches a little girl an old song that she herself learned as a child. A young father lifts his son onto his shoulders so he can better watch the dancers. These simple moments rarely appear in official records. Kings and battles fill many history books. Ordinary happiness often leaves few written traces. Yet archaeology, church records, household accounts, surviving artwork, and countless small clues remind historians that celebration formed an important part of medieval village life. As the afternoon unfolds, games begin. Young men test their strength through friendly competitions. Children chase one another across the grass. Others practice throwing stones toward wooden targets. Some villages organize simple races. Others hold contests involving music, riddles, or storytelling. The prizes are usually modest, perhaps a loaf of bread, perhaps a decorated ribbon, perhaps nothing at all except the enjoyment of participating. Winning is pleasant. Taking part matters more. Imagine wandering beyond the busy gathering toward the edge of the nearby forest. Here the sounds of celebration become softer. Sunlight filters gently through leaves dancing in the breeze. The forest feels wonderfully cool after the warmth of the open fields. Birdsong echoes overhead, while insects hum quietly among patches of wildflowers. For medieval villagers, forests were more than beautiful places. They provided firewood. They offered mushrooms, berries, nuts, medicinal herbs, and building materials. Children learned to recognize useful plants from their parents and grandparents. Knowledge passed patiently from one generation to the next. Many modern people experience nature during occasional holidays. For medieval peasants, Nature surrounded nearly every moment of life. This constant connection influenced how they understood time itself. Spring was not simply another page on a calendar. It could be smelled in blossoms carried by the wind. Summer could be heard in buzzing bees and singing birds. Autumn arrived with golden fields and crisp mornings. Winter announced itself through silent snowfall and long evenings beside the fire. The passing year became something deeply personal. As you continue your quiet walk, you notice several villagers collecting fallen branches. They work slowly, speaking softly as they gather wood for future fires. No one appears hurried. Their movements seem almost meditative. Modern life often rewards doing many things at once. Medieval work usually demanded full attention to one task. Whether weaving cloth, carving wood, grinding grain, or tending animals, each activity invited patience. Perhaps the slower pace allowed the mind more opportunities to rest. As evening begins its gentle arrival, the celebration slowly changes. The bright energy of afternoon gives way to quieter conversations. Children grow sleepy after hours of running and laughter. Parents gather blankets. Older villagers settle onto benches beside the fire. Above them, the sky gradually shifts from pale blue to shades of amber, rose, and deep violet. Smoke rises straight upward into calm evening air. Someone begins singing an old ballad. Others quietly join. The melody is unhurried. Its familiar words speak of changing seasons, faithful friendships, and hope returning after difficult winters. No one performs for applause. The song belongs to everyone. Imagine sitting among them as darkness slowly covers the countryside. The stars emerge one by one. Without city lights, the heavens appear almost impossibly bright. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a silver river, flowing silently through the night. Children point upward, asking gentle questions. Grandparents answer with stories they themselves heard many decades before. Whether every tale is historically true matters less than the comfort it brings. Storytelling connects generations. It reminds people that they belong to something larger than themselves. Perhaps this feeling, a life rooted in family, community, shared memory, and familiar traditions, was one quiet reason why many medieval peasants found moments of genuine contentment, despite lives that were often physically demanding. Their happiness was rarely built upon constant pleasure. Instead, it grew slowly through ordinary days, meaningful work, trusted relationships, and celebrations that returned with comforting regularity year after year. Yet village festivals were only one part of their world. Beyond the cheerful gatherings lay another source of quiet satisfaction: the surprisingly strong friendships between neighbors, where cooperation was not simply kindness, but an essential way of life. That is where our gentle journey will continue next. Imagine that the celebration has quietly come to an end. The last notes of the village songs have faded into the cool evening air, and families have returned to their cottages beneath a sky filled with countless stars. One by one, small fires burn lower, their warm glow shining gently through tiny windows. The village grows peaceful once more, wrapped in a comforting silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the soft rustle of leaves stirred by the night breeze. As you rest for a while beneath this ancient sky, it becomes easier to understand that happiness is often found not in moments of excitement, but in the quiet rhythm between them. The morning slowly arrives again. A pale golden light begins to spill across the fields, touching every rooftop with warmth. Thin ribbons of mist drift over the meadows before disappearing beneath the rising sun. Birds greet the new day with familiar songs, while somewhere beyond the village, the gentle sound of a flowing stream carries through the cool air. You find yourself walking toward the village well. It is already becoming a place of quiet activity. Several women arrive carrying wooden buckets balanced carefully by hand. Neighbors exchange greetings before drawing fresh water together. They speak about the weather, the condition of the crops, the health of elderly relatives, and the playful adventures of children who never seem to stay in one place for very long. To a modern observer, this might seem like nothing more than ordinary conversation. Yet these small daily meetings quietly formed the foundation of medieval community life. There was no social media, no online groups, no instant messages. Instead, relationships were built face to face, day after day, season after season. People knew one another deeply because they shared almost every aspect of life. They witnessed each other's happiest celebrations and hardest losses. They remembered birthdays only rarely, but they remembered harvests, weddings, baptisms, illnesses, and the changing fortunes of every household. This closeness sometimes created disagreements. Living so closely together was not always easy. Arguments over wandering animals, damaged fences, or forgotten promises certainly occurred. Medieval court records preserve many examples of neighbors bringing disputes before local officials. Yet these same records often reveal something equally important. Many disagreements ended through compromise. The people involved understood that tomorrow they would still be neighbors. Next week they might need one another's help. Next month, they might stand beside one another. During harvest, their shared future encouraged reconciliation. Imagine following two neighboring farmers into the fields. One man's ox has become ill during the night. Without healthy animals, plowing becomes almost impossible. Before he even asks, another farmer quietly offers his own ox for the morning's work. No contract is written. No payment is demanded immediately. Everyone understands that kindness given today may return in another season when fortunes change. This exchange is not unusual. Across medieval Europe, communities often depended upon customs of mutual assistance. Scholars sometimes describe this as a moral economy. People certainly valued private property, yet survival frequently depended upon cooperation rather than competition alone. A family whose barn burned down might receive help rebuilding it. Neighbors joined together during harvest when storms threatened ripe grain. Women assisted one another during childbirth. Children were watched not only by parents, but by the wider community. Imagine standing near the edge of a field as several families work together gathering wheat. The sun hangs comfortably above the countryside. Each swing of the sickle follows a calm rhythm. Bundles of grain gradually fill the field. There is conversation. There is laughter. Someone begins humming an old melody, and before long, others quietly join in. Work becomes lighter when shared. Modern research consistently suggests that meaningful social connections are among the strongest contributors to long-term well-being. Medieval villagers did not measure happiness through surveys or scientific studies. They experienced it through everyday cooperation. As the morning continues, you notice something else. No one appears especially concerned with becoming richer than everyone else. This does not mean people lacked ambition. Farmers hoped for larger harvests. Craftsmen hoped for better tools. Families wished to improve their homes whenever possible. But opportunities for dramatic social comparison remained limited. Most villagers owned similar possessions. Their clothing looked much alike. Their homes followed familiar designs. Today, people are constantly shown images of lives that seem wealthier, faster, or more successful than their own. Advertisements quietly encourage comparison. Social media often presents carefully selected moments that appear perfect. For medieval peasants, comparison usually remained local. The wealthiest noble living hundreds of miles away rarely entered daily conversation. Their attention stayed focused upon the people they actually knew. Perhaps this reduced one source of modern anxiety. Picture yourself entering another cottage shortly before noon. The home belongs to an elderly widow. Her children have grown and established households of their own nearby. Although she now lives alone, she is far from isolated. A young neighbor stops by carrying fresh bread, still warm from the oven. Another arrives later to repair a loose wooden shutter. In return, the widow shares dried herbs she gathered during summer and offers advice about preserving vegetables for winter. Every person still contributes something valuable. Old age does not automatically mean loneliness. Wisdom itself has practical importance. Older villagers remember successful farming techniques from difficult years. They recognize illnesses. They settle disagreements. They preserve stories stretching back decades. In societies where written records remain limited, memory becomes an extraordinary form of wealth. As afternoon gently unfolds, imagine accompanying several children toward the village blacksmith. They pause outside the workshop, fascinated by every movement. Inside, the blacksmith carefully shapes glowing iron upon the anvil. Each strike of the hammer sends tiny sparks dancing briefly into the air. The children watch with quiet wonder. They are learning without realizing it. Throughout medieval life, education often happened through observation. A carpenter's child watched wood being shaped. A miller's child learned how grain became flour. A shepherd's child understood animals by spending every day among them. Knowledge flowed naturally through daily experience. This constant sharing of practical skills strengthened family bonds. Parents and children spent many hours together instead of living largely separate lives. Modern childhood offers opportunities medieval children could never imagine. Yet it also often separates generations into different places throughout the day. In medieval villages, work itself frequently brought families together. Imagine now that clouds begin gathering overhead. The breeze grows cooler. A light summer rain begins falling across the fields. Instead of rushing indoors in frustration, many villagers simply continue working for a while, adjusting naturally to the weather. Rain is neither good nor bad by itself. Too little rain threatens crops. Too much creates different problems. Nature cannot be controlled. It can only be understood and respected. This acceptance shapes much of medieval thinking. Modern people often expect complete control over schedules, travel, communication, and comfort. When unexpected events interrupt these expectations, stress quickly follows. Medieval villagers certainly planned ahead, but they also understood that weather, harvests, illness, and fortune remained partly beyond human control. Acceptance became an important survival skill. As the gentle rain passes, sunlight returns. Drops of water sparkle across every leaf. The entire countryside smells wonderfully fresh. Children immediately begin searching for puddles, despite their parents' gentle warnings. Laughter drifts once again across the village. Simple pleasures require no purchase, no ticket, no reservation. Only attention. As evening approaches, smoke rises once more from cottage chimneys. Families prepare another modest meal. Perhaps there is cabbage cooked slowly with herbs. Perhaps beans seasoned with onions. Perhaps coarse bread dipped into warm broth. The food is familiar. Its comfort comes not from luxury, but from repetition. Shared meals quietly become anchors within the day. Around the table, stories continue. Children describe what they discovered beside the stream. An older brother proudly explains that he repaired part of the fence. A grandmother smiles as she remembers a similar evening from many years ago. Outside, darkness slowly settles across the fields. The stars begin their familiar return. The village prepares once more for peaceful sleep. Tomorrow will bring fresh work, new conversations, and countless small moments that history rarely records, but which quietly shaped ordinary lives. And perhaps this is one of history's greatest lessons. Happiness is not always found in extraordinary achievements. Sometimes it grows quietly through familiar faces, trusted neighbors, meaningful work, shared meals, and the comforting knowledge that no one must carry life's burdens entirely alone. As our gentle journey continues, we will next explore another surprising aspect of medieval life: how their relationship with time itself was profoundly different from our own, and why living without clocks, constant schedules, or endless urgency may have brought a unique sense of peace. Imagine that the village has settled into another quiet night. The last embers of the cooking fires glow softly beneath layers of warm ash. A gentle breeze carries the scent of damp earth through the narrow lanes, while somewhere in the distance, an owl calls from the branches of an ancient oak. Above you stretches a sky so dark and clear that thousands of stars seem close enough to touch. Without the glow of electric lights, every constellation shines with remarkable clarity, reminding those below that they are only one small part of a much larger world. You find yourself sitting on a simple wooden bench outside a cottage. An elderly farmer, wrapped in a thick woolen cloak against the cool evening air, gazes quietly toward the heavens. He does not speak for several moments. There is no pressure to fill the silence. In many ways, silence itself was a familiar companion in medieval life. Today, silence often feels unusual. It is quickly replaced by music, conversations, notifications, or the endless hum of machines. Even moments of rest are frequently accompanied by glowing screens that compete for attention. For a medieval peasant, however, silence was woven naturally into each day. There were quiet walks across mist-covered fields before sunrise. There were peaceful moments while tending sheep beneath drifting clouds. There were calm evenings beside the fire after the work had ended. These pauses allowed the mind to wander gently, much like the slow-moving clouds above the countryside. Imagine the first light of morning, slowly spreading across the horizon. There is no ringing alarm clock. Instead, the village awakens gradually. A rooster announces the coming dawn. Cows begin shifting inside their shelters. Birdsong fills the hedgerows. The soft glow of daylight enters through tiny openings in the cottage walls, gently encouraging everyone to rise. The day begins not because a clock demands it, but because nature quietly invites it. This difference may seem small, yet it shapes daily life in profound ways. Modern life often measures every hour with remarkable precision. Meetings begin at exact minutes. Trains depart according to detailed schedules. Phones remind us of appointments, deadlines, and tasks waiting to be completed. Time is divided into smaller and smaller pieces, each expected to be used efficiently. For medieval villagers, time flowed differently. Certainly, people understood the passing of hours. Church bells often marked important moments during the day, especially in larger communities. The position of the sun, the length of shadows, and familiar daily routines also helped people judge the time. Yet there was usually greater flexibility. If rain delayed work, then work resumed after the rain. If a neighbor needed help unexpectedly, plans could change. The rhythm of life adapted naturally to circumstances, rather than insisting that every moment unfold exactly as planned. Picture yourself accompanying a farmer as he walks toward his fields. The path is familiar. Wildflowers bloom along the edges. A rabbit darts briefly across the trail before disappearing beneath a hedge. The farmer notices these small things without slowing his pace. There is no need to hurry. His destination has remained there for generations. It will still be waiting when he arrives. Modern travel often encourages us to think only about reaching the destination. For many medieval villagers, the journey itself formed part of daily life. Walking became a time for quiet reflection. Neighbors greeted one another along the road. Children stopped to admire butterflies or gather interesting stones. Simple observations filled moments that today might be occupied by scrolling through a phone. As the morning slowly continues, you arrive at the fields where several families are already working together. The rhythm of labor feels almost musical. A sickle moves through golden grain. Bundles are tied carefully. Voices rise and fall in gentle conversation. Someone begins singing an old harvesting song, its melody steady and unhurried. Others quietly join. The song does not make the work disappear, but it changes how the work feels. Throughout history, songs have often accompanied physical labor. Their rhythms help coordinate movements. Their familiar words ease long hours. More importantly, they remind workers that they are not alone. Imagine standing among them as the breeze carries the scent of ripening wheat across the countryside. The warm sun rests comfortably overhead. Bees drift lazily from flower to flower. The steady hum of insects blends with distant birdsong until the entire landscape seems to breathe together. These ordinary sounds formed the soundtrack of medieval life. There were no engines, no traffic, no aircraft crossing the sky. Only the voices of people, animals, wind, and water. Researchers today sometimes speak about the calming effects of natural soundscapes. Although medieval people had no scientific language to describe these benefits, they experienced them every day. You find yourself wondering whether familiarity itself can become a source of happiness. The same fields, the same neighbors, the same changing seasons. To modern minds, repetition may appear dull. Yet familiarity also creates comfort. Knowing what tomorrow will likely bring allows the mind to rest. There is reassurance in predictable rhythms. As noon approaches, work pauses. Several villagers gather beneath the shade of an old elm tree. Bread is shared. A wheel of cheese is carefully sliced. Fresh onions and herbs are passed from hand to hand. A small child proudly offers berries collected earlier that morning. No one appears rushed. The meal unfolds naturally. Some people speak. Others simply listen. One elderly woman quietly watches the children playing nearby, smiling as they invent games using little more than sticks, pebbles, and their own imaginations. Their laughter carries across the meadow. It costs nothing. Yet it fills the afternoon with warmth. In today's world, happiness is often linked to acquiring something new. A new device, a new car, a new experience. For medieval peasants, moments of joy were more often discovered within familiar surroundings, a healthy harvest. A child's first successful attempt at baking bread, the return of migrating birds each spring, the birth of a healthy lamb, the arrival of relatives from a neighboring village. These moments were modest, yet deeply meaningful. As the afternoon gently unfolds, clouds gather along the horizon. Their shadows drift slowly across the fields like great ships sailing over a sea of grain. The villagers notice them immediately. Years of observation have taught them to read subtle changes in the weather. A shepherd studies the direction of the wind. Another farmer examines the shape of the clouds. They discuss quietly whether rain might arrive before sunset. Their knowledge has been earned through decades of close attention. In many ways, medieval life encouraged people to become careful observers. Survival depended upon noticing small changes, the color of the sky, the behavior of birds, the condition of crops, the health of animals. Nothing was entirely overlooked. Imagine walking beside the village stream later that afternoon. The water moves gently over smooth stones, producing a soft, soothing sound that has remained unchanged for centuries. Children kneel along the bank, watching tiny fish dart beneath the surface. Nearby, a woman rinses freshly woven linen in the cool water, while chatting with a neighbor gathering herbs. The stream serves many purposes. It provides water. It supports wildlife. It offers a place for conversation. It quietly becomes part of everyday memory. Modern life often separates people into different places for work, shopping, exercise, and recreation. The medieval village brought many of these activities together. Daily life naturally created opportunities for meeting others. Isolation became less likely because community spaces were woven into ordinary routines. As evening slowly approaches, long shadows stretch across the landscape. The golden light softens every rooftop. Smoke begins rising once more from cottage chimneys. Livestock return from pasture. Dogs greet familiar footsteps with gentle excitement. Inside the cottages, simple suppers are prepared, while children eagerly recount the small adventures of the day. One discovered a bird's nest hidden safely among thorn bushes. Another learned how to mend a fishing net. Someone else proudly carried water without spilling a single drop. These achievements may appear ordinary, yet they represent growth, learning, and belonging. The family listens carefully. Every voice matters. As darkness gradually settles over the countryside, another peaceful day reaches its end. The stars begin their nightly procession across the heavens. The village grows wonderfully quiet once again. Tomorrow will arrive with new opportunities to work, to help, to learn, and to share. Perhaps medieval peasants did not think of happiness as something to chase. Perhaps they understood it as something gently woven into the ordinary fabric of everyday life, through meaningful routines, patient work, familiar landscapes, and the comforting presence of people who truly knew one another. As our journey continues, we will soon step inside the homes of these ordinary families to discover how simple domestic life, shared responsibilities, and evenings around the hearth created a deep sense of security that many people today quietly long for. Imagine that the night has passed peacefully. The stars slowly retreat beyond the brightening sky, and a gentle glow begins to spread across the eastern horizon. The air is crisp, carrying the cool freshness that comes just before sunrise. Dew rests upon every blade of grass, sparkling softly as though the fields have been dusted with tiny pieces of glass. Somewhere beyond the cottages, a rooster greets the coming day, while the steady murmur of a nearby stream continues its endless journey toward a distant river. You find yourself standing outside a small, timber-framed cottage. Its walls are built from woven branches covered with clay, carefully maintained by the family who lives inside. The thatched roof, though weathered by many seasons, has been repaired countless times with patience and skill. Smoke begins to curl upward from the chimney, rising gently into the calm morning air. This is not the home of a king or a wealthy merchant. It belongs to an ordinary family. Yet within these modest walls lies something that many people, across every century, have quietly searched for, a place where they belong. As you step inside, your eyes slowly adjust to the warm glow of the hearth. The fire has already been lit. Its gentle crackling fills the room with a comforting rhythm. The scent of burning oak mingles with the aroma of fresh bread warming beside the flames. Hanging from wooden beams above are bundles of herbs gathered during the summer months: thyme, sage, mint, and lavender, drying slowly for the seasons ahead. Every object inside the cottage has earned its place. There are no unnecessary decorations. A sturdy table stands at the center of the room, its surface marked by years of family meals. Wooden stools have been repaired so many times that each carries the careful craftsmanship of several generations. Clay bowls rest neatly upon shelves. A spinning wheel waits quietly in one corner, while woven baskets filled with onions, beans, and dried apples promise nourishment during the colder months. Nothing here is perfect, yet almost everything is useful. Modern homes often encourage people to gather more than they truly need. Closets become full. Drawers overflow. Boxes are stored and forgotten. The medieval cottage offers a different lesson. Possessions are few, but nearly everyone is valued. a wooden spoon carved by a grandfather, a blanket carefully woven by hand, a chest built decades earlier, still protecting treasured belongings. Objects carry memories as well as purpose. Perhaps this is one quiet reason why they are cherished so deeply. Imagine the family gathering around the table as the morning slowly arrives. The father prepares to work in the fields. The mother slices bread while stirring a pot suspended above the fire. The children sit together, speaking softly about the day ahead. There is no separate dining room. No television dominates the space. No one disappears into another room carrying a glowing screen. The family begins the day together. Conversation is simple. They speak about repairing a fence damaged by last week's rain. They wonder whether the barley will be ready for harvest before the next full moon. The youngest child proudly announces that a hen has laid another egg. Everyone listens. Even the smallest stories matter. In many modern households, family members often leave for school or work in different directions, returning home at different hours. Meals may be hurried or eaten alone. For medieval peasants, daily routines naturally brought people together again and again. Not because they planned family time, because family and work were closely connected. Picture yourself following the mother as she begins her morning tasks. Her work is constant, yet remarkably varied. She feeds the chickens gathered outside the cottage. She checks the small vegetable garden where cabbage, onions, beans, and herbs grow in neat rows. She kneads fresh dough. She mends clothing worn thin from months of use. Later, she may help in the fields, gather firewood, milk the family cow, or spin wool into thread. Modern readers sometimes imagine medieval women confined to a single role. Historical evidence tells a richer story. Women played essential parts in nearly every aspect of village life. Their knowledge of food preservation, textile production, household management, gardening, animal care, and seasonal planning often determined whether a family prospered through difficult years. Much of this work rarely appeared in official records, yet it quietly sustained entire communities. As the morning grows warmer, you notice the children moving confidently between their small responsibilities. One carries water from the village well. Another gathers herbs growing beside the cottage wall. The youngest carefully scatters grain for the chickens, smiling proudly as the birds hurry toward breakfast. No one expects perfection. Mistakes are accepted as part of learning. Older brothers and sisters patiently demonstrate each task. Parents offer gentle correction. Skills are passed from one generation to the next, almost without formal instruction. Education happens through living. Imagine stepping outside once more. The village lanes are becoming busier. A blacksmith's hammer rings steadily across the morning air. Its rhythm echoes between cottages like the heartbeat of the community. Nearby, the mill wheel turns slowly beneath the flowing stream. The sound of grinding grain blends with birdsong, distant laughter, and the occasional bark of a village dog. None of these sounds compete for attention. Instead, they seem to belong together, creating a peaceful harmony that changes gently with each passing hour. Modern cities often surround people with constant noise. Traffic, sirens, construction, machines. The medieval village certainly had its own sounds, but they followed natural rhythms. There were busy moments and quiet moments. Periods of activity were balanced by long stretches of calm. As noon approaches, sunlight pours warmly across the countryside. The fields shimmer beneath a gentle breeze. Workers pause beneath the shade of a great oak tree. Today their meal is simple: coarse bread, soft cheese, a handful of fresh herbs, perhaps a few apples stored carefully from the previous autumn. One family shares a small pot of bean stew. Another passes around a basket of onions. Food is exchanged freely among friends. Hospitality is rarely extravagant. It is simply expected. A traveler passing through the village might be offered bread, a place beside the fire, or directions to the next settlement. Acts of kindness strengthen the fabric of community little by little. Imagine sitting quietly among them. No one asks what career another person has chosen. No one measures success by wealth alone. People are respected for their reliability, for their honesty, for their willingness to help when help is needed. A trustworthy neighbor becomes more valuable than an expensive possession. As afternoon slowly unfolds, several women gather outside one cottage with spinning wheels. Their hands work steadily, transforming raw wool into fine thread. The work itself is repetitive, yet conversation flows easily. Stories are exchanged. Recipes are shared. Advice is offered to a young mother caring for her first child. Someone remembers an unusually snowy winter from many years before. Another laughs gently while recalling the mischief of her brothers during childhood. These conversations preserve more than entertainment. They preserve community memory. Today, many people listen to podcasts or music while completing household chores. Medieval villagers often shared those moments with one another instead. Work became an opportunity for companionship. As the afternoon sun begins its slow journey downward, you wander toward the edge of the village where several elderly men sit repairing farming tools. Their movements are unhurried. Each crack in a wooden handle is examined carefully. Iron blades are sharpened with patient precision. One younger man watches closely, learning techniques that no written manual could fully explain. Knowledge flows quietly from experienced hands to eager eyes. Nothing is rushed. The tools they repair today may still serve their children many years from now. There is deep satisfaction in caring for things well. Perhaps modern life sometimes loses this quiet pleasure. Replacing an object is often easier than repairing it, yet repairing something creates a relationship with it. Time invested becomes part of its story. As evening gradually approaches, golden sunlight washes gently across the rooftops. Children chase one another through the village green until parents call them home. The smell of fresh soup drifts through the cool air. Someone nearby is baking rye bread. Another family roasts onions beside the fire. The comforting aromas mingle together, creating the familiar scent of home. Inside the cottages, candles are lit one by one. The day's work is finished. There is no expectation of answering messages before bed. No glowing screen pulls attention away from those gathered nearby. Instead, families settle around the hearth. One child curls beside a grandmother eager to hear another story. A father carefully carves a small wooden toy while listening. A mother continues mending a cloak by the gentle firelight. Outside, the wind whispers softly through the thatched roofs. The stars begin to appear once more, the world feels wonderfully still. Perhaps this quiet ending to each day gave medieval families something precious, a clear boundary between labor and rest. When darkness arrived, the pace of life naturally slowed. There was permission to be still, to listen, to remember, to simply enjoy the presence of those closest to you. As our gentle journey continues, we will soon discover that even during the hardest seasons, through poor harvests, long winters, and uncertain years, medieval communities often found remarkable resilience by facing hardship together rather than alone. Imagine that the warmth of the hearth has gently carried you through the night. Outside, the first light of dawn touches the rooftops with a pale golden glow. The village is still wrapped in quiet, and for a few precious moments, the world seems to hold its breath before another day begins. A thin blanket of mist rests across the fields, drifting slowly over rows of barley and wheat. Tiny drops of dew cling to the leaves of cabbage and beans in the cottage gardens, catching the morning light like countless tiny mirrors. You find yourself stepping outside once again. The cool air feels refreshing, carrying the familiar scents of damp soil, fresh hay, and wood smoke. Somewhere beyond the cottages, a shepherd gently whistles as his dog gathers a flock of sheep. The soft ringing of little bells around the animals' necks creates a peaceful melody that drifts across the countryside. It is easy to imagine that every day in medieval life followed exactly the same pattern. In truth, every season brought new challenges. Some years were generous, others tested every family in the village. One of the greatest differences between medieval life and our own was the constant awareness that nature could not be controlled. A late frost might damage young crops. Heavy rains could flood the fields. A summer drought might leave the earth cracked and dry. No amount of careful planning could completely prevent these hardships. Yet despite such uncertainty, medieval villages often displayed remarkable resilience. Imagine that the clouds have gathered for several days. Rain falls steadily across the countryside. The narrow paths become muddy. Streams begin to swell. The work in the fields slows as everyone waits patiently for clearer weather. Inside the cottages, however, life does not stop. Families simply turn to different tasks. Women spin wool into thread beside the fire. Men repair wooden tools that have worn smooth through years of use. Children help shell dried beans, polish cooking pots, or sort bundles of herbs hanging from the rafters. No hour feels wasted. There is always something useful to do. Perhaps this flexibility helped reduce frustration. Modern life often depends upon strict schedules. When plans change unexpectedly, stress can quickly follow. The medieval household adapted naturally to changing conditions. Rain simply meant different work. Winter meant indoor work. Summer meant outdoor work. The rhythm changed with the world around them. Picture yourself sitting quietly beside the hearth on one of these rainy afternoons. Outside, raindrops tap gently against the thatched roof. The fire crackles steadily. The room smells of warm bread and drying herbs. An elderly grandfather begins telling a story he first heard as a child. He speaks of unusually cold winters from decades earlier, when snow covered the fields for many weeks. He remembers neighbors sharing grain with families whose stores had become dangerously low. He recalls how several households worked together to repair a roof that had collapsed beneath heavy snow. As he speaks, the younger children listen with wide, thoughtful eyes. These stories are more than entertainment. They are lessons. They teach patience. They teach courage. They remind every generation that difficult times eventually pass. Modern psychology often speaks about resilience as an important quality for emotional well-being. Medieval villagers rarely used such words. Instead, resilience was quietly practiced through shared experience. No family expected to face hardship entirely alone. Imagine a poor harvest after an unusually dry summer. The fields have produced less grain than everyone had hoped. It is disappointing. The villagers know that winter may require careful planning. Yet instead of each household turning inward, neighbors begin helping one another. One family still has plenty of beans. Another has stored extra onions. Someone else preserved apples during autumn. A fisherman from a nearby river village exchanges dried fish for grain. Small acts of cooperation spread quietly through the community. Not every village responded perfectly. History reminds us that severe famines sometimes overwhelmed even the strongest communities. Many people suffered greatly during those terrible years. Yet during ordinary hardships, mutual support often made survival possible. You find yourself walking through the village after the rain has finally ended. The clouds have drifted away. Sunlight breaks through, warming the wet earth. Every leaf glistens. Birds immediately return to singing. Children splash happily through shallow puddles despite gentle reminders from their parents to keep their boots dry. The entire landscape seems refreshed. There is something quietly hopeful about watching nature recover after a storm. Perhaps medieval people noticed this more often than we do. They watched the fields every day. They understood that difficult weather rarely lasted forever. The seasons always continued their patient cycle. Spring followed winter. Harvest followed planting. Rest followed labor. Imagine now that autumn has arrived. The air feels cooler. The leaves of the great oak trees have begun turning shades of gold, amber, and deep red. Across the fields, families work side by side gathering the harvest before colder weather arrives. This is one of the busiest times of the year. Yet it is also one of the most satisfying. Months of careful effort are finally becoming visible. Every basket of grain represents countless hours of work beneath sun and rain alike. Children proudly help collect fallen apples. Older men stack bundles of wheat into neat rows. Women prepare vegetables for storage while chatting with neighbors. The village moves with quiet purpose. There is tiredness at the end of each day. But it is a tiredness that carries meaning. Modern life sometimes leaves people feeling exhausted without seeing the results of their labor. Medieval work often produced visible outcomes: a repaired fence, a harvested field, a loaf of bread, a woven blanket. The connection between effort and result remained close. This could bring a quiet sense of accomplishment. As evening slowly arrives, the harvest work comes to an end for the day. Families gather outside before returning home. Someone begins singing an old harvest song. Others quietly join. Their voices rise gently into the cool evening air. The melody is simple. Its words have been sung for generations. The children do not know every verse yet, but they smile as they try to follow along. Songs become bridges between generations. Imagine following one family back toward their cottage. The smell of roasting vegetables greets them before they even reach the door. Inside, the fire burns warmly. A pot of thick soup bubbles gently over the flames. Fresh bread rests upon the table. The youngest child eagerly tells everyone about discovering a hedgehog beneath a pile of leaves. An older sister proudly explains that she helped gather twice as many apples as last year. The parents listen with genuine interest. No achievement is considered too small to celebrate. These simple conversations quietly strengthen family bonds. Outside, darkness slowly settles across the countryside once again. The wind rustles through nearly empty branches. A dog curls comfortably beside the doorway. Somewhere far away, a church bell sounds softly across the valley. The stars gradually appear above the village. They are the same stars watched by countless generations before. Perhaps medieval peasants found comfort in this sense of continuity. The world changed slowly. The seasons returned faithfully. Children became parents. Parents became grandparents. Stories continued. Songs continued. Life continued. Even during uncertain times, there remained quiet reasons to hope. As our peaceful journey moves forward, we will soon explore another surprising part of medieval happiness: the rich calendar of winter evenings, storytelling, handcrafted traditions, and the slow pleasures that filled the darkest months of the year, when families spent long nights together around the glowing hearth. Imagine that the harvest has been safely gathered. The fields that only weeks ago shimmered with tall golden grain now rest quietly beneath the cool autumn sky. Stubble remains where wheat and barley once swayed in the summer breeze, and flocks of birds wander across the open ground, searching patiently for the few scattered seeds left behind. The air has changed. Each morning carries a sharper chill than the one before. The leaves that painted the forests with shades of gold and crimson have begun drifting gently to the earth, covering the narrow village paths with a soft carpet that rustles beneath every step. You find yourself walking slowly through the village, just as the first hints of winter begin to appear. Families are busy, but there is no sense of panic. Everything follows a familiar rhythm that has been repeated for generations. Bundles of firewood are stacked carefully beside each cottage. Vegetables harvested from summer gardens are stored in cool places where they will last through the colder months. Strings of onions hang neatly from wooden beams. Apples are packed into barrels. Nuts collected from nearby forests are dried and stored away. Every household prepares with quiet determination. For medieval peasants, winter was never a surprise. It arrived faithfully every year, and experience had taught them how to welcome it. Preparation itself became a source of confidence. Imagine stepping inside one of the cottages as a cold wind begins blowing outside. The thick wooden door closes behind you, leaving the chill safely beyond the walls. The warmth of the hearth embraces the room immediately. Flames dance gently over split oak logs, filling the cottage with soft orange light. The comforting scent of burning wood mixes with dried herbs hanging from the ceiling and the rich aroma of a stew that has been simmering slowly throughout the afternoon. Outside, the world feels cold. Inside, everything feels wonderfully peaceful. The family gathers naturally around the fire. There is no need to call everyone together. The hearth draws them in almost like the center of a quiet little universe. Perhaps this was one of the greatest gifts of medieval homes. The fire was not simply for warmth, it was the heart of family life. Nearly every important conversation happened nearby. Meals were prepared there. Stories were shared there. Children learned there. Grandparents remembered there. As evening slowly settles over the village, candles are lit one by one. Their small flames flicker gently whenever someone opens the door. Shadows move softly across the timber walls, creating familiar patterns that children have watched since they were very young. Imagine sitting among them. No one seems hurried. Outside, darkness has completely covered the countryside. Without electric lighting, night becomes something to embrace rather than ignore. The day has ended. The work is finished. Now comes another kind of richness. Time together. An elderly grandmother reaches into a small wooden chest and removes a spindle. Her hands move almost effortlessly as wool twists into smooth thread. She has repeated this motion thousands of times over the course of her life. Nearby, a grandfather carefully carves a small wooden spoon for one of his grandchildren. Each stroke of the knife is slow and deliberate. The children watch closely, not because they have been told to, because they are fascinated. In medieval homes, learning rarely stopped when work ended. Evenings became classrooms without walls. Skills passed naturally from one generation to the next. A child watched, then helped, then practiced. Eventually, the child became the teacher. This quiet chain of knowledge stretched across centuries. Picture yourself listening as someone begins telling a familiar story. The youngest children immediately gather closer. They already know parts of it. They smile when favorite moments arrive. The older children pretend they're too grown up for bedtime stories, yet they continue listening just as carefully. The storyteller speaks slowly. The tale may describe a clever fox who outwits a greedy wolf. Perhaps it tells of a wandering pilgrim who discovers unexpected kindness. Maybe it remembers an ancestor whose wisdom saved the village during a difficult winter. Not every story is historically true. That is not always the point. Stories help preserve values. They teach patience. They encourage generosity. They remind listeners that courage often appears in quiet forms rather than grand heroic acts. Long before books became common, stories carried memory from one generation to another. Imagine looking around the room. One child quietly continues weaving a small basket. Another carefully repairs a worn leather shoe. A mother finishes mending a wool cloak that has already served the family through several winters. Nothing is discarded simply because it has grown old. Everything deserves another chance. Modern life often encourages replacement. Medieval life encouraged restoration. This way of thinking extended beyond possessions. Relationships were also repaired whenever possible. Neighbors who argued usually found ways to work together again. Families overcame disagreements because daily survival depended upon cooperation. Communities became stronger through forgiveness as much as through hard work. As the wind whistles gently outside, snow begins to fall. At first, only a few delicate flakes drift past the tiny window. Then, gradually, the snowfall becomes thicker. Soon, the entire village lies beneath a soft white blanket. The familiar paths disappear beneath fresh snow. The roofs become smooth and silent. even the sounds of the world seem quieter. Imagine opening the cottage door for just a moment. Cold air rushes gently inside. The night feels wonderfully still. The snow reflects the light of the moon, making the landscape glow with a peaceful silver brightness. Footprints from a passing fox cross the village green before disappearing toward the forest. No engines disturb the silence. No distant highways hum beyond the hills. Only the soft whisper of falling snow fills the night. For medieval villagers, winter certainly brought challenges. Travel became more difficult. Fresh vegetables were scarce. Cold weather demanded careful use of firewood and stored food. Yet winter also brought something precious: rest. The busiest agricultural work paused. Families spent more time together. Craftsmanship flourished. Conversations grew longer. Stories became richer. Children enjoyed more hours beside parents and grandparents than during the busy harvest season. Modern people often complain that there is never enough time. Medieval villagers probably felt the same during planting and harvest, but winter offered a different pace. Life slowed naturally. Imagine the days passing one after another. A father teaches his son how to sharpen a small carving knife safely. A mother shows her daughter how to recognize strong wool from weaker fibers. Grandparents explain which stars appear brightest during the longest nights of the year. Outside, snow continues covering the countryside. Inside, another generation quietly prepares for adulthood. No formal graduation ceremony marks these lessons. No certificates hang upon the walls. Knowledge is measured by confidence, by patience, by careful hands, by dependable character. As weeks pass, the days slowly begin growing longer once again. At first, the change is almost impossible to notice. Then one evening, someone remarks that the sun remained above the horizon just a little longer than before. Hope quietly returns. The darkest season is already beginning to fade. Perhaps medieval people appreciated spring so deeply because they experienced winter so completely. Modern heating, lighting, and supermarkets soften many seasonal differences. For medieval villagers, every returning season felt meaningful. Every longer day became a promise. Every bird song announced another beginning. As you sit quietly beside the glowing fire, listening to the gentle crackle of burning wood, it becomes easier to understand that happiness does not always arrive through constant excitement. Sometimes it grows through simple routines: shared work, patient learning, warm homes, familiar stories, and evenings spent with people who know your name, your history, and your place within the community. Yet one important question still remains. If medieval peasants often found contentment in these ordinary moments, why has the modern world, despite its remarkable comforts and technologies, so often struggled with stress, loneliness, and the feeling that time is always slipping away? That quiet question will guide the next chapter of our journey. Imagine that the long winter has finally begun to loosen its quiet grip upon the land. The mornings are still cool, and patches of snow linger in the deepest shadows beneath ancient trees. But something has changed. The sunlight feels warmer upon your face. Tiny streams that were silent beneath sheets of ice now begin to murmur once again. Birds return one by one, filling the countryside with songs that have not been heard for many months. You find yourself standing at the edge of the village as the first signs of spring gently awaken the landscape. The fields are no longer empty. Farmers walk slowly across them, examining the soil with experienced eyes. They kneel to pick up small handfuls of earth, rubbing it carefully between their fingers. They are not simply looking at dirt. They are reading the future. Centuries of observation have taught them that healthy soil carries its own quiet language. They notice its moisture, its texture, its scent. They understand that another growing season is about to begin. Perhaps this careful attention to the natural world shaped their minds in ways that are difficult for us to imagine today. Modern life often encourages us to look downward at glowing screens. Medieval life invited people to look outward, toward the clouds, toward the trees, toward the changing sky, toward one another. Imagine walking beside an elderly farmer who has spent more than 60 years working these same fields. His steps are slow, but every movement carries quiet confidence. He points toward a distant hedge where the first blossoms have appeared. "The bees will not be far behind," he says softly. A little farther along, he notices birds gathering twigs. "They know something we already feel," he smiles. "Spring has truly arrived." To him, nature is not separate from daily life. It is a trusted companion. Every season brings familiar signs. Every year tells the same story in slightly different ways. Modern calendars divide the year into neat pages. The medieval villager experiences time through living landscapes. The return of swallows, the blooming of hawthorn, the scent of freshly turned soil, the first lambs in the pasture. These become the true markers of the passing year. As the morning slowly continues, the village becomes busier. Children carry small baskets filled with seeds. Women prepare garden beds beside their cottages. Men repair wooden plows that have rested through the winter. Even the animals seem more energetic. Geese wander noisily across the village green. Dogs chase one another through patches of fresh grass. The entire community seems to awaken together. Imagine stopping beside a small orchard where several families are pruning fruit trees. No one works entirely alone. Advice flows as freely as conversation. One man demonstrates the best way to trim an old branch. Another explains how his father always protected young trees during unexpected frosts. Nearby, an elderly woman gently reminds a child not to remove every blossom. "Leave some for the bees," she says kindly. Small pieces of knowledge pass quietly between generations. No classroom is needed. Learning belongs to everyone. Picture yourself noticing something else. There are very few strangers here. Almost every face is familiar. Each greeting carries genuine recognition. A smile, a nod, a few friendly words. These simple exchanges may seem ordinary, yet modern researchers have discovered that even brief positive interactions with familiar people can improve our sense of well-being. The medieval villagers never measured such things scientifically. They simply lived them, again and again. Day after day, season after season. As the sun climbs higher, you walk toward the village green. A traveling merchant has arrived. His cart is filled with goods gathered from towns and villages many miles away. Bright cloth, iron tools, salt, pottery. perhaps even a few rare spices carefully wrapped inside small cloth bags. The children gather first, their eyes wide with curiosity. Adults soon follow. The merchant brings news as well as merchandise. He speaks of distant markets. He describes roads recently repaired. He shares stories from villages beyond the hills. For people whose lives are deeply rooted in one place, visitors offer a gentle glimpse into the wider world. These encounters are exciting, yet they are temporary. When the merchant continues his journey, the village quietly returns to its familiar rhythm. Perhaps this balance is worth noticing. There is enough novelty to awaken curiosity, yet not so much that daily life becomes unstable. Modern people often experience the opposite. Constant streams of new information arrive every hour, news from across the world. Advertisements, messages, opinions, videos, images. The mind rarely has time to settle. The medieval villager certainly faced uncertainty, but information itself moved slowly. There was time to reflect, time to absorb, time to simply be present. Imagine that the afternoon has grown pleasantly warm. Several children wander toward the edge of a nearby woodland. They carry no expensive toys. Instead, they discover endless possibilities within nature itself. One carefully collects unusually shaped stones. Another follows the flight of a butterfly through a patch of wildflowers. Two brothers build a tiny shelter from fallen branches, pretending it belongs to travelers passing through the forest. Their games require imagination more than possessions. Adults nearby keep a gentle watch while continuing their own work. Childhood unfolds naturally within the life of the community. As the afternoon begins to soften, you find yourself sitting beneath a broad oak tree whose branches have sheltered generations before you. Its trunk is enormous. Its bark carries the marks of centuries. How many conversations has this tree quietly witnessed? How many children have climbed its lower branches? How many elderly villagers have rested beneath its shade after long days in the fields? The tree asks for nothing. It simply remains. Perhaps this quiet permanence offered comfort in an ever-changing world. Modern cities often transform within a few decades. Buildings rise, buildings disappear. Roads change, neighborhoods evolve. For medieval villagers, familiar landmarks remained almost unchanged throughout an entire lifetime. The old oak, the village well, the church tower, the winding stream. These places became companions. They quietly reminded people that although life changed, some things endured. Imagine that evening is approaching once more. Golden sunlight stretches across the fields, turning every blade of grass into glowing threads of light. Workers return slowly toward the village. No one seems eager to rush through these final moments of daylight. The day's labor is complete. There is satisfaction in honest effort. A father pauses to lift his young daughter onto his shoulders. She laughs as she watches swallows dart gracefully across the evening sky. Nearby, an elderly couple walks hand in hand toward their cottage. Their pace is slow. They have followed this same path together for many years. Perhaps happiness often grows through these repeated moments rather than extraordinary events. Shared walks, shared meals, shared silence, shared seasons. Inside the cottages, evening meals are prepared. The familiar aroma of vegetable soup fills the warm rooms. fresh bread is broken and passed around the table. Someone offers thanks for the food before the meal begins. Children eagerly describe what they learned during the day. Parents listen carefully. Grandparents occasionally add a quiet memory from long ago. The conversation flows gently. No one glances at a clock. No one worries about tomorrow's emails. The evening belongs entirely to those gathered together. As darkness settles across the countryside, the stars appear once again. The village grows wonderfully quiet. A cool breeze moves softly through the trees, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and new blossoms. You find yourself looking upward, just as countless villagers have done before. They could not know what future centuries would bring. They could not imagine electricity, airplanes, or computers. Yet beneath these same stars, they searched for many of the very same things we still seek today: meaning, friendship, purpose, belonging, peace. Perhaps those desires have changed far less than the world around them. And as our journey nears its conclusion, one final chapter awaits us, a quiet reflection on what modern life might gently learn from medieval peasants, not by returning to the past, but by remembering the timeless human needs that have always helped people live meaningful lives. Imagine that one final morning has arrived. The first light spreads slowly across the familiar village, just as it has throughout our journey together. A gentle mist rests over the fields before quietly lifting into the warming air. The cottages, the winding paths, the grazing animals, and the old church tower all seem peaceful in the soft glow of dawn. You find yourself standing on the small hill overlooking the village one last time. From here, everything appears wonderfully simple. Thin trails of smoke rise from thatched roofs. Farmers begin walking toward their fields. Children chase one another between cottages before being called back for breakfast. The village slowly awakens, not with noise, but with quiet purpose. It is tempting to imagine that this peaceful scene tells the whole story, but history asks us to be careful. The lives of medieval peasants were not easy. Many experienced hunger after poor harvests. Disease could spread through villages with frightening speed. Medical knowledge was limited. Infant mortality was painfully high. Life expectancy was often shortened by illness, hard labor, and periods of scarcity. Heavy taxes, rents, or obligations to local lords could make life difficult, and wars sometimes swept across the countryside, destroying homes and crops that families had spent years building. These hardships were real. They should never be forgotten or romanticized. If given the choice, very few people today would willingly exchange modern medicine, clean water, reliable food supplies, or personal freedoms for the uncertainties of medieval life. And yet, history is rarely a choice between happiness and suffering. Human life has almost always contained both. This is where our quiet question returns. Why do so many historians, psychologists, and social thinkers believe that medieval peasants may have possessed certain kinds of happiness that modern society often struggles to find? Perhaps the answer lies not in what they owned, but in what surrounded them every single day. Imagine following one ordinary villager through an ordinary week. He wakes with the sunrise. He knows nearly every person he meets. His work has visible meaning. His children learn beside him. His parents live nearby. His neighbors depend upon him, and he depends upon them. His evenings belong to his family. His seasons follow nature. His celebrations are shared by the entire community. It provides water. It supports wildlife. It offers a place. Many experienced hunger after poor harvests. Disease could spread through villages with frightening speed. Medical knowledge was limited. Infant mortality was painfully high. Life expectancy was often shortened by illness, hard labor, and periods of scarcity. Heavy taxes, rents, or obligations to local lords could make life difficult, and wars sometimes swept across the countryside, destroying homes and crops that families had spent years building. These hardships were real. They should never be forgotten or romanticized. If given the choice, very few people today would willingly exchange modern medicine, clean water, reliable food supplies, or personal freedoms for the uncertainties of medieval life. And yet, history is rarely a choice between happiness and suffering. Human life has almost always contained both. This is where our quiet question returns. Why do so many historians, psychologists, and social thinkers believe that medieval peasants may have possessed certain kinds of happiness that modern society often struggles to find? Perhaps the answer lies not in what they owned, but in what surrounded them every single day. Imagine following one ordinary villager through an ordinary week. He wakes with the sunrise. He knows nearly every person he meets. His work has visible meaning. His children learn beside him. His parents live nearby. His neighbors depend upon him, and he depends upon them. His evenings belong to his family. His seasons follow nature. His celebrations are shared by the entire community. His identity is rooted in place. His expectations, though humble, are often realistic. He does not expect every day to be exciting. He hopes simply for good weather, healthy animals, enough food, peaceful neighbors, and the laughter of children. These hopes are modest. Perhaps that is exactly why they can so often be fulfilled. Modern life has given humanity extraordinary gifts. We travel farther than medieval kings could have imagined. We speak instantly with loved ones living across oceans. We survive illnesses that would once have been fatal. Knowledge from every corner of the world fits inside a device that rests in our hands. These achievements deserve genuine gratitude. But every gift sometimes arrives with an unexpected companion. Constant connection can become constant interruption. Unlimited information can become overwhelming. Endless choices can become exhausting. Comfort can quietly reduce our daily movement. Entertainment can replace conversation. Efficiency can leave little room for rest. Social media can create comparison where none existed before. Work can continue long after sunset. The boundaries that once separated labor from rest have become increasingly difficult to see. Imagine explaining your daily routine to one of the villagers we have come to know. You describe answering messages while eating breakfast, working beneath bright lights long after darkness has fallen, listening to dozens of voices every day through headphones and speakers, receiving news from distant countries within seconds, owning hundreds of objects, yet sometimes feeling there is still something missing. The villager would almost certainly marvel at such things. Some would seem miraculous. Others might seem difficult to understand. Then imagine the villager quietly describing an ordinary day in return, walking through dew-covered fields, sharing bread with neighbors, repairing a fence built by his father, listening to birds instead of machines, watching children invent games from sticks and stones, ending the evening beside the fire while stories pass naturally from one generation to the next. Neither life is perfect. Neither life is free from worry. They are simply different. Perhaps happiness has never depended entirely upon technology or wealth. Perhaps it grows wherever human beings experience purpose, belonging, trust, and meaningful relationships. These are needs that have remained remarkably constant across centuries. As the morning slowly continues, you notice something that has quietly accompanied us throughout this journey. Almost every peaceful moment has involved other people. Families preparing meals together, neighbors harvesting together, children learning beside grandparents, friends singing during festivals, villagers rebuilding homes after storms, communities sharing food during difficult seasons. Again and again, happiness appears not as an individual achievement, but as something created together. Modern scientific research often arrives at a similar conclusion. Long-term studies repeatedly suggest that close relationships are among the strongest predictors of life satisfaction. Money matters, health matters, safety matters. But lasting happiness often depends just as much upon trusted friendships, supportive families, meaningful work, and strong communities. In that sense, the medieval village still has something gentle to teach us. Not because it was a better world. It was not. Not because it was easier. It certainly was not. But because it reminds us of needs that remain deeply human. Imagine the village preparing for another evening. Children help carry bundles of firewood. A mother kneads bread while quietly humming a familiar melody. An elderly man pauses to greet every passerby on his slow walk home. The blacksmith closes his workshop. The mill wheel gradually stops turning. The shepherd counts his flock one final time before darkness settles across the hills. No one realizes that, centuries later, people around the world will wonder how they lived. To them, this is simply another ordinary day. History often remembers kings. It remembers queens. It remembers battles. It remembers castles. Yet the true heartbeat of the medieval world belonged to millions of ordinary people whose names have been forgotten. They planted fields. They baked bread. They raised children. They repaired roofs. They cared for aging parents. They celebrated weddings. They mourned losses. They laughed with friends. They worried about tomorrow. They hoped for better harvests. In these quiet ways, they were not so different from us after all. The sun slowly begins to sink below the western hills. Golden light washes across the village one last time. The fields glow softly beneath the evening sky. Swallows sweep gracefully through the cooling air. The smell of fresh bread drifts from open cottage doors. Smoke rises gently into the fading light. One by one, families return home. Candles flicker behind tiny windows. The first stars appear overhead. The village grows wonderfully still. As darkness settles peacefully across the countryside, you take one final look at the winding paths, the weathered cottages, and the fields that have nourished generations. This quiet place reminds us that happiness has never been a treasure, hidden in castles or locked inside great fortunes. More often, it has been found in shared meals around a simple table, in the comforting rhythm of familiar seasons. In honest work, whose purpose could be seen with one's own eyes. In evenings, free from endless distraction. In stories told by firelight. In children laughing without hurry. In neighbors who knew your name long before they knew your successes. The medieval peasants we have visited were not happier because their lives were easier. They were happier in certain ways because many of the things that nourish the human heart, community, belonging, routine, purpose, nature, gratitude, and time spent together, were woven naturally into everyday life. Their world has long since faded into history. The cottages have weathered away. The voices around those ancient hearths have fallen silent. The fields have changed hands countless times, yet their quiet lessons remain. Perhaps, as you leave this peaceful village behind and return to the modern world, you may carry with you a small reminder that the greatest comforts are not always the newest ones. Sometimes they are the oldest. A shared meal, a slow walk, a meaningful conversation, a familiar place, a kind neighbor, a peaceful evening, and the gentle understanding that, across all the centuries that separate us from those medieval villagers, the human heart has always found its deepest contentment in much the same places. The stars continue their silent journey across the night sky, just as they did hundreds of years ago. The fire burns a little lower. The village sleeps. And our quiet journey through the medieval world comes gently to its end.